In the vast expanse of human disappearances, few cases challenge our understanding of civilization itself, like what happened to the heir of America's most powerful family in the remote wilderness of New Guinea. What official reports classify as a tragic accident may conceal something far more disturbing about the true nature of humanity when stripped of its modern veneer. But first, join our subscribers who crave the unexplained. Hit subscribe. It was November 19th, 1961, in the treacherous waters off the Asmat coast of Netherlands, New Guinea. The son of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller found himself clinging to an overturned catamaran in shark-infested waters, 23 years old and heir to one of America's greatest fortunes. Michael Rockefeller had arrived in this remote corner of the world months earlier, driven by an obsession with documenting the art and culture of the Asmat people. The dense mangrove swamps and tidal rivers of this region harbored one of the last Stone Age cultures on Earth, a society where headhunting and cannibalism remained integral to spiritual beliefs. The official expedition records describe a routine collecting trip that turned catastrophic when rough seas capsized their boat. Michael's companion, Dutch anthropologist René Wossing, chose to stay with the overturned vessel. But the young Rockefeller made a decision that would echo through decades of speculation and fear. According to Wossing's testimony, Michael stripped down to his underwear, tied empty gasoline cans to his waist for flotation, and announced his intention to swim the estimated 3 miles to shore. The last documented sighting placed him swimming strongly toward the Asmat coast, his pale figure disappearing into the morning mists. What followed was one of the most extensive search operations in the history of the Dutch colonial administration. Military aircraft, naval vessels, and ground teams scoured thousands of square miles of jungle and coastline. The Rockefeller family's immense wealth and political influence ensured no resource was spared in the hunt for the missing heir. Yet the search teams encountered disturbing inconsistencies from the very beginning. Local Asmat villages provided conflicting accounts of any white man reaching their shores. Some claimed complete ignorance, while others offered fragmentary stories that shifted with each telling. The tribal leaders' responses carried an undercurrent of nervous energy that experienced colonial administrators found deeply unsettling. Dutch patrol officer Wim van der Wal documented particularly strange behavior in the village of Utsjinab, located directly across from where Michael was last seen swimming. The village headman, a weathered warrior named Finn, initially denied any knowledge of the missing American. But van der Wal noted how the man's eyes repeatedly darted toward a specific longhouse when questioned, and how conversations ceased abruptly whenever patrol members approached certain areas of the settlement. More disturbing were the physical traces discovered along the coastline. Search teams found pieces of the capsized catamaran washed ashore near Utsjinab, confirming that currents could have carried a swimmer to this exact location. But they also discovered something that never appeared in official reports: strange wooden stakes driven into the mud at precise intervals along the beach, each carved with symbols that local guides refused to interpret. The investigation took a darker turn when patrol officers began interviewing Asmat warriors about their recent activities. The timing of Michael's disappearance coincided with a period of increased tribal warfare and ritual headhunting in the region. Dutch colonial records from this period, many still classified, reference intercepted communications about special ceremonies being conducted in villages that had previously been peaceful. Father Cornelius van Kessel, a Catholic missionary who had lived among the Asmat for over a decade, provided testimony that colonial authorities immediately suppressed. Van Kessel reported that several Asmat men had approached him in the weeks following Michael's disappearance, seeking absolution for what they described as necessary acts to appease the ancestors. When pressed for details, the warriors spoke of a white spirit that had emerged from the water during a sacred season. The missionaries' private journals, discovered decades later, contained even more disturbing details. Van Kessel wrote of finding freshly carved his poles, traditional Asmat memorial sculptures, in villages that had reported no recent deaths. These towering wooden monuments typically commemorated tribal members killed by enemies, serving as focal points for revenge ceremonies and ritual consumption of enemy flesh. What made these particular his poles extraordinary was their unprecedented height and the complexity of their carved figures. Van Kessel described humanoid forms that bore distinctly non-Asmat features, tall, thin bodies with elongated limbs and faces that seemed to represent beings from outside the known tribal cosmology. The craftsmanship suggested they had been created with unusual urgency and spiritual significance. Dutch intelligence officers conducting parallel investigations uncovered evidence of increased trading activity between Asmat villages in the months following Michael's disappearance. Items of particular value included steel tools, metal objects, and most significantly, pieces of equipment that matched the specifications of gear known to have been in Michael's possession. When confronted with these objects, tribal members claimed they had been gifts from the water spirits. The most chilling discovery came from aerial reconnaissance photographs taken during the extensive search operations. Military pilots reported observing large gatherings in remote jungle clearings with hundreds of Asmat warriors participating in ceremonies that involved the construction of massive wooden platforms. The scale of these gatherings was unprecedented in colonial records, suggesting a tribal mobilization that crossed traditional territorial boundaries. Ground teams dispatched to investigate these ceremony sites found them completely abandoned, with only charred remains of enormous fires and strange arrangements of human bones that forensic analysis could not definitively identify. The bone fragments showed evidence of deliberate modification and ritual preparation, but their origins remained mysteriously indeterminate. Perhaps most disturbing were the changes observed in Asmat artistic production following Michael's disappearance. Anthropologists noted a dramatic shift in traditional carving styles, with new motifs appearing that had no precedent in documented Asmat culture. These included representations of pale-skinned figures with distinctive facial features that bore an unsettling resemblance to Western physiognomy. Local art traders reported that Asmat carvers had begun producing pieces of extraordinary quality and spiritual power, commanding unprecedented prices from collectors throughout the region. The subjects of these new works often depicted transformation scenes, human figures morphing between recognizable tribal forms and something altogether more alien and disturbing. The official investigation concluded after 6 months, with Michael Rockefeller declared dead by drowning, his body presumably consumed by sharks or crocodiles. But classified reports from Dutch military intelligence painted a far more complex picture of what may have actually transpired in those remote jungle villages. Intelligence officer Captain Johannes Sneep filed reports describing coordinated deception among Asmat tribes that suggested sophisticated planning and communication networks. His analysis indicated that multiple villages had synchronized their responses to colonial investigators, maintaining consistent false narratives that required unprecedented tribal cooperation. Most significantly, Sneep's reports documented the discovery of a makeshift camp approximately 5 miles inland from where Michael was last seen swimming. The site contained evidence of recent habitation by someone of non-Asmat origin, torn fabric that matched clothing Michael had been wearing, empty containers of a type used by Western expeditions, and most unnervingly, carved messages in English scratched into tree bark. The messages, photographed but never publicly released, consisted of fragmented phrases that suggested extreme psychological distress. They watch, always, cannot escape the ceremony, and most chillingly, becoming something else now. The handwriting analysis proved inconclusive, but the linguistic patterns matched Michael's educational background and documented writing style. What happened to Michael Rockefeller in those final days remains one of the most carefully guarded secrets in the archives of both Dutch colonial administration and American intelligence services. The truth may be far more terrible than simple murder or accidental death. The evidence suggests a prolonged encounter with forces that challenged not only Michael's survival, but his very humanity. The Asmat people possessed sophisticated spiritual technologies for transforming enemies into allies, for incorporating foreign power into tribal structures, and for ensuring that those who entered their domain never truly left. The question that haunts investigators decades later is not whether Michael Rockefeller died in the jungles of New Guinea, but what he may have become in the process. What do you think really happened to Michael Rockefeller during those final days in the Asmat jungle? Subscribe to explore more cases where the official story conceals far darker truths.